Hello, good evening. My name is Tim Caldwell, and the title of my project is Space Leakage. So, with my studies, I am interested in exploring the relationship between spaces that are separated by forms, and what happens when a threshold allows these spaces to interact. So much in architecture has been about making absolute separation between spaces. And the Noli maps are an example of that. My work tries, in fact, to use image and technology to address the opposite. What if these spaces are connected? And what if there's a way to map this leakage? So what is space leakage? Well, I define it as two areas of space interacting with each other through and by a threshold of a moving object. A reference I found most helpful is Del Costo's Escaping Criticism. The object, in this case a boy, is escaping an abstract space by crossing the threshold of a realistic frame. In my studies, the door is my object, which is moving. The interior space, because it is also completely black, is an abstract space to the machine vision which I am using. And the frame of my doors are realistic. And so it's here that I begin my experiments with doors. For my studies, I'm experimenting with three movements of doors: radial, horizontal, and vertical. With the radial movements, this is what the machine vision through photogrammetry captures as space leakage, and I wanted to understand why. Why is the machine vision capturing this? So I dissected it. And through these experiments, I am able, in analyzing this form of leakage, I discovered that through photogrammetry, the machine vision captures the tension between the exterior and interior spaces and maps them as form. Through these experiments, I am able to monitor this tension of space leakage, and from where the door adds to the tension and where the spaces themselves begin leaking. We can see this at 50 degrees, where the door is part of the leakage, and to 80 degrees, where it's completely separated, and now is a tension between the exterior and interior spaces. Now, for the horizontal movements, in this series of experiments, I can already begin understanding why the space leakage is behaving this way. The doors moving horizontally create zero tension of objects to space, and instead give a wider opening for the tension between spaces to interact. But that's not all it does. Here we witness a dramatic change in space leakage to the point where it not only creates space like fluid water, puddling and shifting to one side, but also begins leaking past the barriers of the exterior. Which leads me to my final experiment in this series, vertical movements. And at this point, I have an educated guess as to why space leaks in this behavior. Due to the door lifting upwards, the abstract space inside slowly becomes discovered by the machine vision, against the contrast of the realistic space outside. Now, these results reinforce the form of tension that is in growth of leakage towards extending upwards. But why is it moving to one side specifically that we see in plan? So in my conclusions of these experiments, I found three main factors that affect space leakage: ratio, lighting, and speed. And these are factors I plan to explore in greater detail during my thesis year, but for now, I understand them as this. Ratio. The ratio of door to building plays a pivotal role in that this regulates how the tension can be captured by the exterior and interior spaces. The smaller the door, the smaller the leakage. Lighting. This is perhaps the most important factor of the three factors. The positioning of the threshold to the light source is an obvious factor in the formation of space leakage, and is clearly shown here. We can see at the top one, the top right, that the leakage is leaking towards the direction of the light and hitting against the side of the enclosure. whether when it's hitting directly parallel, the space begins leaking outwards. And yes. And when space begins leaking outwards, it actually crosses the boundaries of the physical exterior of the form. And the last factor is speed. The speed of movement, continuous or in increments, also play a factor in the tension of spaces. These are two scans done with the same door, both in different experiments, and we can see we get different tensions because of that movement. So let's see. What is plain to me now is that these leakages are not static. There is no one space leakage for one door, but it is fluid tension of space and flux. So much so that even the spaces themselves begin leaking into each other. As seen in the animation to your right, for the juror who's here, I am now exploring these spaces. I am now exploring what these spaces are doing and what exactly these spaces are creating. This led me to begin researching what third space is. Third space, as I understand it, was authored by Donald Winnicott when he wrote about area of individual development and experiences given by transitional objects and transitional phenomena. He sees the third as a realm in which both inner reality and exterior life contribute. And it is the realm in which I wish to also explore in greater detail. Here we can see the boundary of the shed in which the physical barrier is, and how, as these objects, as these space leakage is in constant flux and constant growth, they are leaking across each other and on top of each other. So from here, I think a logical jump is to move into augmented reality. The reason I chose this is actually quite fitting for my project in that it deals with the frame. The frame every one of us carries in our pockets, cell phone. With this cell phone, we are the moving threshold between the physical reality that we live in and the digital realm, which we are viewing through this frame. Just as the boy is trying to escape the threshold, in augmented reality, so is space leakage also trying to escape its boundaries. Thank you so much for your time and exploring this journey with me, and I look forward to hearing your remarks. Thank you.
Can you show us the animation as well? Is that possible?
Is it possible? The link is on my, yeah.
Or you can just share the video. Which one do you
So which in the folder, screen 2.
okay.
So I think, yeah, if we just go back. Perfect. This is so great. I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm so happy that other people do.
I have no idea. Can you see the?
Is it not sharing?
We see PDF.
Okay, thank you. So yes, this is a fly through of the space leakage as it is growing. While the doors are being slowly opened horizontally, these are forming. And so at this point, I began exploring what this space between spaces looks like and ultimately what does it mean. So I'm still in the exploring phase of this. This is not something that I even thought would be a factor, but I think it's definitely worth exploring. Oh, Mr. Drummer, I think if you're speaking, we cannot hear you.
Peter, we cannot hear you speaking, Peter.
Oh.
Thank you for the presentation. I have a lot. I wrote down a lot. I appreciate the novelty of this, of your investigation. Just out of curiosity, have you ever worked with an air technician? Do you know what in German it's Lufttechniker? People that deal with like HVAC systems.
No.
You should really, if this is, because if I'm clear, when you say space leakage, what you're talking about is actually gas and solids. Is that?
So I did
Air's,
think about that.
Air's
and
moving in whether what you call one outside air or inside air.
yeah, so that was one of the things I was thinking. With the photogrammetry, am I capturing air or what am I capturing? And if I was interested in air or these molecules moving, I could create a study where digitally enclosed, I would have two separate spaces with different particles. And when I open the threshold, I'll see how they react.
Yeah.
I believe this is gearing more towards the lighting. Because as pitch black, darkness is abstract. As lighting begins to reveal the inside, photogrammetry captures that as space.
Okay, I think that's an important distinction to make for your presentation.
Yeah.
Because light and gas they're elements within a space. With space leakage, the space exists already. It's all space.
Yeah.
And so is the color coding here that's going on, this variation in colors related to light intensity, or there's a sort of thermal quality to this? And is this a thermal image we're looking at?
No, so you're the second to observe that. Yes, so the color palette does come across as a temperature reading because of the warmth to the light. I chose these colors wanting to have them be complementary, but also ethereal. Now, the original colors was just blue and orange, but because of the movement and because of other lighting, they start taking on other types of purples, pinks, reds, other things. So I like this material because every render is almost different from the next. And it allows the speculation that this is growing and moving and not something static or materialistic. I was looking for something more ethereal. So that's why I chose those colors, but the machine vision did not give me these colors. I chose these.
Okay. On another tangent here, it also might be interesting for you to look at, there's companies that also measure light in extremely sensitive machinery. The same goes for measuring gases and measuring air movement. These are all very specific fields within some form of technical engineering. They use them in all sorts of applications, but the machines that can measure how much light and the temperature of the light and all these have incredibly precise machinery, and it might be interesting for you to look at because that all generates images as well.
Yeah.
And there's also, I think, a body of knowledge with all of those fields that seems to be tacked on later, but I'm sure is integral to developing architecture. And I find the whole arena there super interesting in terms of sculpture, gases and lights, a gas moving from one form to another. So that was the part about the coloring. It reminds me a little bit about, I guess, the threshold itself as a tool or a device is maybe also interesting to think about. That when it's open or closed, there's an opportunity there for transformation of the space as well. And I would think that this is the first step in a very complex way of thinking.
Mm.
But thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I ask you a question? What's your I mean, I think it's a beautiful project. The images are really suggestive, so it might just be me that has these other images in my head. But what do you think your project is in relationship to Kiesler's Endless House?
I'm sorry, what was that last part? The thesis?
Okay, that's an answer. I mean, you might want to look into that, Friedrich Kiesler's Endless House, and how it sort of relates to ideas of metaphysics, what he was thinking about. Like, I mean, there are some sort of like parallels that, I mean, maybe I'm imagining, that makes this project actually a little bit, yeah, even more interesting to me if you start thinking about sort of certain critiques that were maybe inscribed in that project in terms of what contemporaries of his were doing in terms of modernism, and how you start to think about that as leakage of imagery, and how one produces space out of that. There might be something there. If yeah, my question was if you thought about that. If not, maybe you want to look into that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think physics is actually a really important topic in regards to this way of looking at concepts. In that it's interesting, physicists or cosmologists, when you speak to them about material elements, this room we're in is there's no such thing as empty space.
Mm-hmm.
Even in space.
Yeah.
Planet, no such thing as empty space. It's still an amount of particles. And the difference between the oxygen in this room and the wall material is just simply a question of
Density or
molecular density or components. And in fact, the surfaces where those interact, they're bleeding into each other.
Yeah.
There's a microscopically thin layer where oxygen and the walls of paint on the wall are blended.
Yeah.
So I think all those are really interesting topics in relationship to definition of space. What we say.
Yeah, and you're definitely right with the physics as a whole, a trail I can go into, and I think I should in order to do this justice. Also thinking the machine vision I'm using, photogrammetry, it's in a way it doesn't know as much data as these other programs do, and it only receives what I give it. So I can tailor how much information I want the machine vision to pick up depending on what programs I use to display space. Like you were saying, the density of space. It will definitely affect my next readings that I do with a photogrammetry, and maybe it'll lead to other programs that I use which might map space better than maybe photogrammetry wasn't made to capture space. I mean, it is, but yeah. Yeah.
I think that's good. What wasn't made for? What it wasn't made for.
Yeah.
So just a couple of words. I mean, I think that you have a very beautiful project, and also it's interesting that it has another sensibility than what we usually see when we see a photogrammetry or a point cloud or mesh. Like there is this other painterly sensibility that has been also raised, and how you work that, like you subjectively also have intentions about what colors you want to use and things like. I think that's all good. You're using same technique as many others, but you're gaining your own kind of aesthetic expression with it. But then I was thinking, because I mean, I have had a lot of good feedback, but I was also thinking of the idea of framing that you brought up. And even here, even looking at here where you have just a square frame I think that that is interesting, also in relation to kind of the opening of the door, opening of the window, and how this space or room, or whatever you want to call it, changes due to kind of the opening. I mean, so I think that you should problematize even more the idea of the frame. And if you enter into AR or like the augmented reality aspect, like what is augmentation for you, and really problematize the frame. Literally. So you don't only come walk, you know, like one thing, okay, I have it in my pocket and I bring it up. That's one thing. That's the easy access thing. But what if you know, take that further? So, because I think it's important now, it looks, when I look now at this screen, it looks as an extensive space.
Mm.
It doesn't have an edge, a corner condition. It doesn't have a start or an end. It, you know, it has a spatial difference, but it doesn't differentiation volumetrically. But it, you know, the whole thing of an edge and like, you know, these other qualities that are related to the idea of a frame.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Okay, Ulrika, that was a comment.
Okay, if you have to move on, we move on.
Comment?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to agree with Ulrika's comment. I think it's super important that you do that, and then it's the frame doesn't become a resultant of something, but then it really acts as the third, as you are talking about. So it needs to have some motive to it. So I think to add that as a tripod setup, then suddenly it will become more solid, and perhaps even include kind of rigor into your experiments.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry for the interruption.
Sorry, that's
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you.